All right, about to bring this run in for a landing. Almost done. Obviously didn't get great weather today, but that run in the rain is the coolest part of every training montage, right? So we've already talked about the logistics and the differences there in terms of an amputee versus an able-bodied person running. Now I'm gonna get dried off, cleaned up, and we're gonna go over the other two differences, or the other two categories I think it's worth looking into: technique and just actual training and progression. So, like I said, I'm gonna go get cleaned up. We're gonna knock that out.
Number one housekeeping tip. You want your house to smell good. There's all the candles, there's all the incense, there's all the this, that, the plugins. When really, you could just make chili and smell better than all of that, and you get to eat it. Now back to the video. All right, and welcome back to the show after that quick little housekeeping tip. So we've already talked about the logistics of running and that it's mostly experiential in terms of what is the actual difference between running as an amputee compared to able-bodied, which is the common question I'm always answering as a coach. And so that's why we're diving in and making this whole video. So again, we've talked about the logistics. Yeah, it's pretty different. A lot of different brands of trial and error. That's just the reality of our life. Fortunately, that's the biggest deviation for running as able-bodied and running as an amputee, not technically an amputee, anybody using a prosthetic. All right. There's three more buckets that I want to get into because these are the things that we get a lot of conversations about. And honestly, I think this is where our community is not being served because we're being given a lot of bad information. And I love sharing what I'm learning and what I'm observing. None of these are guesses. None of these are based on just me. Yes, I'll never be able to learn more about athletics and movement and this than what I can learn by my own thing myself because I am the one that feels it. But all of these opinions and all of these things are coming from the place of this is what has consistently shown itself to be true the more and more people I work with. And I'm going to start with one quick mindset PSA. I'm going to hop on the soapbox real quick and start with this. This leaning into it's different, it's this, it's that, it's harder for me. Most of these are self-imposed limitations. These are self-limiting beliefs. They're not facts. Or if they are facts, they're irrelevant. Because a lot of times what happens when we start leaning into that, we also start leaning into the idea that it's not fair or this would be easier if, and yeah, you know what? It's probably freaking true. It would be easier for me to accomplish some of these running goals I have if I had 2 working feet. Why? Because feet are freaking awesome. And they're super capable. If that's your thing, that's your thing. But what I'm talking about is the foot's extremely complicated and robust, and it can do all these incredible things. Why else would we have all of these feet to sort of replicate what it can do? But it doesn't matter. I can let that make a decision like, I can't do this in my life because it's harder. Or, you know what? Problem solving is just a part of my life. But also, if you got to wherever you are and you've never had anything in the minus column, 1, I'm sorry. That sucks. But 2, you're still going to have to engage in problem solving. Problem solving is just a part of it. And lean into this is just a piece of the puzzle to get the life that I want to do. This is a life experience that I want to have. I want to go to these places and I want to have these feelings and emotions, and that includes hardship and that includes all of this. So you know what my amputation kind of gave me a little bit? A jump start. It gave me a legitimate jump start accelerator on my problem solving abilities. There's no way I'm as good at that now as if I wouldn't have had my amputation or had my injury with the CRPS. So we got to get out of that mindset, plain and simple. If you feel this and you feel like, oh, everything has to be catered to me, especially because I'm an amputee and because that doesn't exist, well, that's an excuse not to go do it. I can choose to go figure it out because that's a life experience I want to have. We'll hop off the soapbox and we'll get a little bit more into a little more objective, but also everything I'm going to go over, it's not 100%, nothing is 100% sweeping. Nothing is. So understand that this is just what I've seen to be consistently true. So we got these 3 buckets after logistics: running technique, strength aspect of it, the actual training. So we're going to start with technique. First off, understand that all of these devices, all of our prosthetics, this guy, all the way up, this is a very low level foot on this little slip-on leg I'm wearing right now, all the way up to the highest end running blade. They are designed with this in mind. Perfect human mechanics. Like, that's what these things work under. They work under perfect human mechanics. And another thing to understand is that none of our movement derives actually from our feet. It all comes from our hips and our spine. So I'm assuming that if you're going to be running, even if you're missing regardless of the amount of leg we are missing, we have hips. And this is where technique comes from. And this is where all the perfect stuff happens. And because that's the case, technique differences when it comes to amputee running, it's not none, but it's extremely minimal. And here's where I'm going to hop back on a quick soapbox, because there is one cue, one running piece of the puzzle that I've been given plenty of times, and I am not discounting the differences between running as a below knee and an above knee amputee. So what I'm getting ready to say obviously doesn't apply if you are an above knee and you're choosing to circumduct, which is where you lock the knee out and you create this little half circle. If you are an AK watching this and you're curious about this, I am not the guy that, while I can and have taught this, I think it's more appropriate and fair for somebody who actually does it to make that content. And I can absolutely link you up with a couple of above knee amputees that are just fantastic runners, extremely talented, and also probably faster than me. I'm very slow. So the techniques are very different. But anyway, the cue that I'm going to go after here: kick your blade out. No, don't kick your blade out. Do you kick your other leg when you run and walk? Do we do this? No. So we shouldn't do it on our blade. Again, this comes from our hip. And to get people into that cue is getting people to run and driving through the anterior, when running and walking is a posterior driven action, first and foremost. Second, again, you don't kick the other leg out. So what are you doing? You're intentionally telling someone to get rid of the symmetry that we want in our hips in a gait cycle. We don't walk differently, or our goal is to not walk any differently on our affected limb compared to our sound side. So again, why would we give a cue like this to somebody when they're trying to do the highest form of walking, which is running? Running and sprinting is the most intense version of our gait cycle that I believe that I can think of. I'm sure that this will prompt somebody to inform me otherwise. Cool, I learned something new. So that's a terrible cue for pretty well everyone. And it's not going to serve us long term. Even if you're sitting here like, Sam, I do that. Well, like, is your gait symmetrical? Do we have a limp? Like, these things create like a limp and a delay. And again, we run out of we lose our symmetry on purpose, and our ability to kind of just flow and progress gets greatly inhibited by just kicking our leg out. Again, it's just not something that we do. Getting that foot out there should be coming from the hip. It should be coming from the posterior chain, the glutes and the hamstrings. Yes, your quads absolutely play a factor, but that's not where we want to drive and derive our movement from. So the differences are minimal. Now, here's the piece of the puzzle. Here's where we actually feel like a difference. But it's not a difference in technique. It's this right here. And this concept I'm about to talk about is probably the most universal thing to understand. And if we do it right, we use it as a gift to become a better operator of our device. And it is, no, the technique doesn't change, but yes, we have a lower margin of error. If this is your physical representation of the margin for error of somebody with 2 feet and ankles and everything works well, ours shrinks. What they can get, what another person may be able to get away with, you may not, because we don't have all the compensatory tools of the ankle. Cool. Again, we chose to be here. We chose to run. We chose to do this. We chose to keep living. Like we choose to exist. And so a lower margin of error is very much the case, though. An example I'll use is, well, an amputee can't throw a kick in kickboxing. I kick harder than most people that I know. Why? Because I leaned into this, and I have no choice but to have better technique, and better technique creates more power. That's why I can kick harder. That's why I can run well. All these sorts of things, because I chose to be a technician instead of just a survivalist. Well, I didn't fall, so it was good enough. That's not really where we want to go with this. So we've got a lower margin for error, but there are very minimal differences. And there's one other technique point that really probably gets presented by a running blade, and it's because the running blade typically only covers the front third to maybe half of a foot strike. And this discussion will always exist in the running community because it makes great clickbait. But the reality is they found success with all 3 heel, mid, or forefoot strike. You're gonna probably have to be, and this includes your sound side, a mid or a forefoot striker when you run, because that's where the blade is, and then that's where the symmetry is going to be. In order to use that blade well, you're probably going to have to be a mid or a forefoot runner. I also would suggest, and I believe that this is where pretty much all runners should probably be. And there are ideal scenario, not including people's motivation to learn or get better, which is a huge piece of the puzzle. And again, with more options, a bigger, greater margin of error, you get more choices. Again, just a scenario we're in as amputees. So these are the technique points I think that are important to understand. Now, when it comes to strength, I'm not going to dive too deep into this one because I could literally go on for about 3 hours. And actually, I'd love to. Maybe one day people will pay me to come out and do these actual breakdowns, and we'll actually do a full breakdown of all this stuff. But the biggest thing with strength is it ties into this relationship here of our lower margin for error. The reality is we are using an inanimate object that compresses, and the only thing it wants to do is expand and extend. So the primary trait of strength actually here is stability. That's the most important thing. Can you control when that blade compresses? Can you prevent it from, like, the explosion part of our mechanics, our extension, to when we actually want that and create that timing? That's a huge piece of strength. And when I work with most of the amputees I've worked with, this is actually where we're deficient, and this is why our technique doesn't look like we want. Now, here's the problem. We tend to solve this problem incorrectly. And I'm gonna get into that real quick after I get into training. So, when training, I'm talking about the running program and how we make adjustments and when we dial things back and pick things up. Outside of other injuries we may have in relation to our amputation, maybe we were in an accident. I've got a friend who we both are left below knee amputees. My limb length's just a little longer than his, but there's actually a huge difference. He had an accident, was hit by a vehicle on a four-wheeler, and his hip has also got some damage too. This isn't relating, so these adjustments aren't in relation to him being an amputee. It's him having an injury history. And most human beings at some level have some sort of mileage, wear and tear, etc. So we're going to ignore that side of it because that's a very normal thing to have to adjust and adapt for. Our ability, but so again, as a human being, I'm assuming all human beings watching this, our training differences, like what our program needs to look like, is none. We adapt the same way, we recover the same way, we respond to the same recovery tactics, our nutrition, our hydration, our sleep, our stress management, all comes into play the same as everyone else. Once we have these things all accounted for and we're taking care of it all, the actual training running plan doesn't vary because you're an amputee outside of like the experiential things. Like, well, tearing and breaking skin, that's going to be a problem and you're going to have to back that off. Same as if you got you got a bunch of blisters on your feet because you wore the wrong socks for a long run or whatever. So so the training is actually, it's not really different. And that should be a relief. And I say this primarily and dive into this because of the same thing I started this little whiteboard section with, is this idea that you need something special and catered is not as true as we've been led to believe. Yes, it is really useful as an amputee to be able to work with somebody who understands the experience, but a good coach is a good coach, and a good guidance is good guidance. Now we're getting to the last piece of the puzzle where I think the biggest mistakes get made, and it's a bigger deal for our community because of our lower margin of error. However, I see this with everyone. Now, we have a deviation in our gait. We're limping when we run. We probably are lacking, or what I commonly see is we are lacking a lot of stability on our prosthetic. We are not ever comfortable standing on one leg, these sorts of things. And I will make its own video on my personal strength prerequisites and what sort of things need to be really sound and strong to run well as an amputee, because if we don't run well, we can't run for a long time. We can't, and as people who use prosthetics, we probably don't want to pay an extra cost because we need the parts we have to last, and we need to take care of them. And that gets taken care of by technique. So we've got a technique issue. Often I see there is something about understanding and practice, and there's an amount of practice you have to develop any technique. But more often than not, I see that the reason why we have this deviation is a strength deficiency. However, our common solution is more training. We do more running. We think that running that's highlighting the deficiency is somehow going to fix the deficiency. And that's just almost never the case. Really what we do is we ingrain and we get better at the compensations. We get better at using the deviation, and it becomes harder and harder for our brain to wrap its way around doing this thing differently now, because again, we've continued to ingrain this compensation because we thought just doing more was the solution to something we weren't doing as well as we wanted to, instead of really highlighting it, zooming out and taking a look at all three of these and figuring out where are we off. And so that's the last piece I want to get into in terms of like running as an amputee. It's like the strength is probably a bigger influencing factor than able-bodied. Again, because we are controlling an inanimate object. And the reality is, if it's not working right, it's because you're telling it the wrong things. It only does what you tell it to do, because how else could it do anything else? This is not HAL in Space Odyssey. Your foot has not turned against you. Your device is not working against you. It's doing exactly what you say. And nothing on earth will you ever experience that will listen to you better than that. So to bring this one in for a landing here, I wanted to make this video because I love sharing these things. I love working with people as much as I enjoy athletics and being an athlete, and the fact that I have been able to maintain that through all the things that I've gone through. My athletics are really just R&D. When it came to endurance, I found an area that I thought was important that I didn't have the personal experience with, and I want to have it. and I want to understand it. But more than that, I want to be also share it, share what I'm learning, share how it's working. Don't, create the biggest ripple I can from all the things that I've learned and studied for over 15 years. And so, like, that's like the bigger deal to me. That's where all this creates all the value. And to kind of highlight what was the big overall theme. None of these things are really that different. I have an intro to running ebook called The First Step, and it's been run by dozens of people at this point, both amputees and able-bodied, and everybody the results haven't been different. Like, it just works. Like, these concepts from a principle standpoint, these things don't change because we have a disability. And so I just want to share these things, and in fact, why not? It's a whole ebook. It comes with, this was not intended, but I like this because, again, I want to share this. It's a whole ebook. It's a very simple running progression. It's a way for you to learn how to practice your running, how to build technique with some cues and some drills to prime yourself as we're learning to do this, some basic recovery tactics. It's got a lot in there for what I'm about to give it to you for. If you put a comment in here saying that you're interested in the First Step running ebook, cover right here, I'll sell it to you for $10. Again, leave a comment, tell me that you want that book, and I will get a hold of you. I will get you that PDF, and we'll move forward from there. And from there, also, if you got any other questions, other things that you want me to tackle or talk, if you're really interested in this strength for running component, put it in the comments or put specific lanes or questions that you want to make sure I address, because I want to do that. Again, I like diving into this. I love a whiteboard. I love a whiteboard. I don't necessarily love writing in real time. Sometimes I'm like, oh man, I have this tendency to go fast and scribble, but hey, nothing we can't get better at, right? Thanks for hanging out this long. Again, on top of the comments, liking, subscribing, sharing means a lot because I'm just trying to put value out. Yeah. So until next episode,